today we will be reviewing decimal place value and rounding. And so in order to do that, the first thing I want to do is review with you a decimal place value chart. So as we have been lately, you should be writing everything that you are seeing. So I have a place value chart here, and notice that right here is my decimal. Okay, remember anything to the left of a decimal is whole numbers, right? Okay, and anything to the right of a decimal is our decimal place values. All right, so if my whole number is here, then on this side, this would be my ones, my tens, and my hundreds. Okay, now remember, there's no such thing as oneths. Okay, I know that a lot of times we think that since this is the ones place here, that this has to be the oneths, but there is no such thing as a oneth. Okay, and what you need to do is you need to think of it this way. When I have a whole, okay, so here's my whole. Okay, this is one whole. Okay, if there was such a thing as a oneth, okay, it's going to be exactly the same thing as a whole, because a oneth would just be one piece out of the whole. And so technically a whole and a oneth, if oneth was real, would be the same thing. Okay, so there is no such thing as a oneth. And since we're dealing with base 10, meaning once I make a group of 10 in my ones, I go over here. Once I make a group of 10 tens, I move over, and 10 hundreds, I move over, and so on. That's what base 10 number system means. Okay, we do the same thing over here. So we're taking our one whole, that's right here, and we're going the opposite direction. And instead of making a group of tens, we're taking our one and cutting it into tens. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One more. Okay, so I took my whole, let me do a different color, that was here in the ones, and now I've cut it 10 times. Okay, once I do that, then I have what's called a tenth. This right here is a tenth. Okay, and then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to take that tenth and I'm going to cut it 10 times. Okay, and so this tiny little piece right here is a hundredth, because it is now 1/100th of the whole that I started with. Okay, and if I take that tiny, tiny little tenth and I cut it into 10 pieces again, okay, I would have this tiny, tiny little piece right here, and that would be 1,000th. Okay, so we do not have oneths. Okay, we do tenths, hundredths, thousandths. All right, so now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and write down some steps that you'll need. So these are the steps that you're going to need for rounding to decimals today. So I'm going to pause the video for a couple minutes and you're going to go ahead and write these down. All right, so let's review these steps. So the first step is to find your rounding place. Okay, so that could look one of two ways. I could have something like, let me write this out. Let's say I have 31 and 51/100ths. Okay, and my directions tell me round to the nearest whole number. Okay. So in this case, I would not have anything underlined. They're specifically telling me in the directions to round to the nearest whole number. Well, remember that means this place, the ones place. Okay, so if I get this direction right here, I always need to look for the ones place. Sometimes they give me the direction to round to the underlined place value. So let's say I have 112 and 12 hundredths, and they have the 10th place underlined. Okay, then that is the place that I would round to. Okay, so it's really important that you make sure that you're reading the directions, because the directions are going to tell you what place. So they're going to tell you step number 1. Okay, after you figure out what place you want to round to, you're looking at that place, and then you look next door to see if you have 5 or more. If you do, then it goes up. If you have 4 or less, it stays the same. Okay, so everything including, well, everything on the right of this number stays the same. So the 3 doesn't change. But since I'm rounding to the nearest whole number and I'm looking next door, this is a 5. That means that this 1 is going to go to a 2. And because I'm rounding to the whole number, I don't need anything in the decimal place. Okay, that's step number 3. Drop all digits to the right of the rounding place. So if I wanted to, I could write it like this, but normally we don't. Normally, if it's a direction that's saying round to the whole number, we just write the whole number. Another way that you can think of this is if I have a number line and I have 31, and let's think money for a minute because it's easier to think about money. Let's say there's $31 here and there's $32 here. The exact middle would be $31.50. Okay. Anything at the middle or above the middle, we round up. Since this is $31.51, that would be right after the exact middle spot. So because of that, we would round it up to $32. So let's look at this one. We already know that we need to round to the underlined place. What we're doing is we're looking to see, am I going to bring this underlined place up or is it going to stay the same? So I look next door. That is a 2. If it's 4 or less, it stays the same, meaning the 1 stays the same. Okay, and anything in front of the 1 stays the same. And then step 3, I drop all of the digits after the rounding place. Since the rounding place was to the tenths, I do not have to put anything else after the 10th there. So let's practice a couple. You're going to see these directions in your practice problems and your quiz today. So the first direction says round to the nearest whole number. Okay, so notice there's nothing underlined because the direction is telling me what to round. Remember, nearest whole number means the ones place. So this is the ones place for 6 and 7 tenths. This is the ones place for 12 and 1/10. So what they're in essence asking me is this closer to 6 or 7? Okay, that's what it means when I'm rounding like this. So I look next door and it is a 5 or more. So that means the 6 and 7 tenths would round to 7 because I would go up. And again, if I had a number line, if 6 was here and 7 was here, the exact middle would be 6.5. So 6.7 would be about right here. So it would round up. So let's do the same over here. So 12 and 1/10, I'm rounding to the whole numbers, which is the ones place. So I look next door. Since this is less than 5, that means the 2 is going to stay the same. So I round this to 12. Again, if I do it on a number line, if I have 12 here and I have 13 here, the exact middle is 12 and 5/10. But we have 12 and 1/10. So that would be about right here. 12 and 1/10 is definitely closer to 12 than it is to 13. Because that's a very small hop. It's only 1 away from 12, but it's 9/10 away from 13. And then the second direction. So this time they're telling me what my place is that I need to round because it's underlined. So we do the same thing. And sometimes for some of you, it might help if you think of it this way. Remember, everything that is before the underlined digit stays the same. So that means this 32 stays the same. Okay, 32 and the decimal. The place that we want to round to is the tenths place here. So I'm going to look next door and I see that it's a 5, which means that this 6 needs to go up. So this would round to 32 and 7/10. Over here, again, I can do the same thing. I can write my 3, my decimal, and my 2, because that's everything that is before my underlined digit. So that will have to stay the same. And I'm going to look next door. Since 6 is 5 or more, that means that this 4 needs to go up. So that would round to a 5. So now we're going to practice that with some practice problems.